Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, there it is. Okay. Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is it feels like Friday. It's February, but it's actually Tuesday. Tuesday, February 17th, 2026. I'll get it together eventually. I'm shocked. I'm shaken. I'm shook at the news of the day. I don't know. There's definitely things to be shaken about. There are two enormous celebrity deaths to make note of. Only one overtly political, but there's certainly messaging to be found in everything and in all lives. Jesse Jackson, I guess, will top the list today because it's a political show. Although he was the second of the passings to reach my eyes, actor Robert Duvall as well died yesterday. Let's see. Duvall, 95 years of age. Jesse Jackson, 84. It's somehow important to note these things in terms of how old they were when they died, I guess. Give you some sense of what's going on. I don't know. It's traditional. And, of course, you know about Jesse Jackson's respect for traditions that don't particularly make any sense in everyday life. I don't know. He probably would have said, that's actually not very important. But all right, we'll note it. Lives well lived in both cases. Interesting to see the lives reviewed, of course, in the write-ups in the paper. And Jesse Jackson, I think probably correctly, I don't know how much inclination there might even be to argue, but that his 1984 and 88 presidential runs, as well as the rest of the entirety of his political background, laying the foundation for what I guess now stands as the progressive movement in the Democratic Party. And certainly one of the early leaders in formulating the multiracial coalition idea of the Democratic Party. And so credit there. Much else happening elsewhere in the news, things we need to sum up with, things that happened during the day after the show, things we alluded to during yesterday's show that I meant to get to that I didn't. Lots of things happening today. I guess, though, perhaps besides the eulogies, top news in circulation this morning includes CBS News continues to, I guess, swirl the bowl on its way down the toilet here. This extending past CBS News into CBS proper, I suppose, the CBS entertainment side of things, where everything is, the ownership's politics colors everything. As you know, I guess we're still awaiting Colbert's eventual departure from the network, that too driven by politics. But the latest story on that front, let's see. There are several news sources on it. I happen to have grabbed this one from latenighter.com, which probably was one of the first to write it up because they were up late at night in order to discuss it. But you will have seen it in mainstream news by now. But I guess Colbert had already taped this interview, but a fairly routine, normal thing to do, interviewing James Talarico, a Texas, currently state legislator, running, though, for Senate in Texas, and now has picked up the primary challenger as well, Jasmine Crockett. So anyway, Talarico's name has been in the news quite a bit. He's doing a fantastic job running his campaign and getting notice for it and making a real run at challenging for the seat, which is always an issue and always just out of reach, it seems, during polling season, and then a little bit more out of reach when the votes are actually cast. But once again, threatening to make a real run at the seat and making quite a splash politically while doing it. So Colbert has him on for an interview. which is, totally normal. But at some point, CBS brass steps in and says, you can't air this interview. It's, I don't know, and no reason openly is given other than, well, they may have said, well, it was too overtly political, or it means we've got to have the other candidates, or some. I'm sure that was underlying the excuses they'll eventually give, but they didn't. It's not like they felt compelled to actually explain themselves at this point. All right, so the Late Nighter write-up of it, latenighter.com. Colbert says CBS pulled guest amid FCC scrutiny. Ah, yes, that's right. That's a big part of it. And posts the interview on YouTube instead, which by all accounts has generated something of a Streisand effect, I suppose, even if it's not exactly the same sort of thing. But it drove everybody there to see the forbidden segment. So some 100,000 viewers on YouTube overnight, and probably many more but now that dawn has broken on the East Coast and elsewhere, of course. Anyway, Matt Mitovich, I don't know, you'll have to tell me, Matt, is the writer of this piece. Let's get to it. There is, I guess, a segment about it, or maybe this is the whole thing on YouTube, but I must have some introductory material about it, noting the FCC's intervention in all of this, and I guess leaning on CBS brass somehow to exclude this segment. FCC Chair Brendan Carr's threatened revisiting of the equal time rule, which honestly I've heard plenty of progressives and liberals moan and groan about over the years, and insist if we still had it, then you would have had a counter to Rush Limbaugh on the air, or Glenn Beck, or any of the other mega influencers along the way, although I'm not positive that that's true, and I'm not positive that we're better off with or without the rule. But at any rate, this now has become a conservative and MAGA stalking horse, because, of course, they start with the belief that American conservatives and white men are the most persecuted people in history. So, they're going to get it wrong from the start. Anyway, FCC Chair Brendan Carr's threatened revisiting of the equal time rule has come to fruition, forcing CBS's The Late Show with Steven Colbert to not air an interview with Democratic politician James Talarico. I'm assuming that the warped version of this story, from the FCC's view, being under Trump's thumb, is that, well, everyone knows that, something called the Fairness Doctrine, first of all, most people don't really remember it in operation or know much about it, but how can you lose advocating for the Fairness Doctrine or the Equal Time Rule? Everybody loves fairness and equal stuff, so we'll just name it that. And then, of course, secondly, the idea that the FCC was going to step in and say yes to this guest, no to that guest, as a way of enforcing equal time, versus saying, well, you can do what you want with Talarico, but you should bring John Cornyn onto the stage, or whoever, a Republican to balance it. I mean, it's kind of a stupid idea. And fell by the wayside a long time ago and was eliminated, and as a matter of fact, by Republicans, which, whatever. But the way it manifests itself in the world, of course, is that Trump will be mad about something, and the FCC chair, in an effort to ingratiate himself to Trump, will say, well, the way we're going to handle this apparent unfairness, which is not apparent and not unfair, is to say, well, you'll lose your license. You'll lose your broadcast license. You'll lose access to the public airwaves, something that's never actually, been used against anybody for real forever. You'll lose your licensing and your access to the public airwaves if you do this unfair thing and give unequal time to a Democrat. Not, you need to show me that you can make it a balanced affair, and after careful consideration, we'll think about this thing. No, it's just, don't start by having this particular Democrat, or any Democrat for that matter, that we don't approve, on your air. Well, that's not very equal or fair, but here we are. And so instead, Steven Colbert's sit-down with the Texas state representative currently running for Senate was posted to the late night program's YouTube page, the URL for which Colbert was not allowed to share on air. But I'm pretty sure that the search engines, slopped up with AI as they may be, will still point you in the right direction. And if not, certainly latenighter.com will do it. Colbert detailed his run-in with CBS over the interview during Monday night's broadcast. That he did allow himself to say. James Talarico was supposed to be here. I'm sure he said he. It's in brackets here. But he was supposed to be here, but we were told in no uncertain terms by our network's lawyers, who called us directly, that we could not have him on the broadcast, Colbert said. Then I was told in some uncertain terms that not only could I not have him on, I could not mention me not having him on. But I guess the terms were too uncertain for him. And because my network clearly does not want us to talk about this, let's talk about this. Colbert recapped the equal time provision, the FCC's most time-honored rule, right after no nipples at the Super Bowl, which he'd previously addressed in the immediate wake of Carr, indicating that he was looking into waiving the long-standing exemption for talk show interviews with politicians. Carr said some of the talk shows were motivated by partisan purposes, Colbert said, before adding, well, sir, you're chairman of the FCC, so FCC you. Ha 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 ha. Oh, well, it's not his best joke, but it's pretty good for the moment. The Late Show host then went off on Carr, saying that the Trump-installed FCC chair is motivated by partisan purposes himself, and in that capacity has been Dutch ovening America's airwaves. That's the Colbert we were looking for. Let's just call this what it is, Colbert said plainly. Donald Trump's administration wants to silence anyone who says anything bad about Trump on TV, because all Trump does is watch TV. I should be just playing you this clip, but Colbert observed, it's no surprise that two of the people most affected by this threat are me and my friend Jimmy Kimmel. He then queued up Carr's response to him and Kimmel, discussing the rejiggered equal time rule on their respective programs, in which I guess he must have said, if Kimmel and Colbert want to continue to do their programming, Carr said, and they don't want to have to comply with this requirement, then they can go to a cable channel or a podcast or a streaming service, and that's fine. And that may, in fact, be what happens, and it may, in fact, be fine. But in the meantime, it's short-sighted and grubby, to say the least, and authoritarian as well. Quipped Colbert, great idea, man whose job is to regulate broadcast TV. Suggest everyone leave broadcast TV. It was then that Colbert revealed that his interview with Talarico would see the light of day, albeit on the Late Show's YouTube channel. The network says, I can't give you the URL or a QR code, but if you go to our YouTube page, you'll find it. We'll save you a step. You can find, I guess Late Nighter says, you can find or watch /watch, I guess, Colbert Talarico's Q&A below, though I suspect it's also above, because there's a video up there too, though that may be the introductory material. Colbert went on to note, at this point, Carr has only released a letter that says he's thinking about doing away with the exception, but my network is unilaterally enforcing it as if he had. But I want to assure you this decision is purely for financial reasons, and this doesn't just affect interviews, he explained. The rules forbid any candidate appearance, including by voice or picture, leading him to point out that the photo of Talarico appearing over Soldier was in fact a stock photo. So I can't interview James Talarico. I can't show any pictures of James Talarico, and I'm not even sure I can say the words James Talarico, Colbert recapped. But what I can show you is what we always show you when we have to pull material at the last minute. This tasteful nude of Brendan Carr. And they cue a mock-up of a nude Carr with his bits covered by a small cactus. Oh, okay. In the actual interview below, you'll have to play it for yourself. Talarico ventures that Donald Trump is worried that we're about to flip Texas, ergo the enhanced scrutiny of his TV appearances, including on ABC's daytime talker The View, Corporate media executives are selling out the First Amendment to curry favor with corrupt politicians, he opined. Colbert then fact-checked the politician, saying, my network said our cancellation was purely a financial decision. Aha. So I have you, sir. So, that's the conclusion of their reporting on the issue. And by the way, some production notes along the way. Rosalind McGregor has looked up for us the Wikipedia entry on the fairness doctrine, which is, that's the actual name of it, of course, versus the equal time version of the rule, the equal time rule. It's not exactly what it was demanding equal time necessarily, but let me head over. I'll take this one on the phone here. It's a little easier to read from Rosalind. From Wikipedia, the fairness doctrine, just by way of note here, ended in 1987. That is, of course, Ronald Reagan era. And so it's been some time, and many of you have been born since. Although those of you born earlier, it's been a while, let's say, since 1987. We've operated without it for quite some time. And it did. We should ask Ian Reifowitz about this sometime, but certainly it did give rise to AM conservative talk radio in that era and carry conservative message all the way through and more or less unmatched on the other side. There's a whole history to it. But the rest of the text that she grabbed from Wikipedia's entry, the Fairness Doctrine of the United States Federal Communications Commission, and there's a link to their site there, or their Wikipedia entry, introduced in 1949. It's just interesting. So about 1950 to about 1990, not quite 40 years, right? For less than that. That's actually not a very long run when you think about it. So let's say 1950 plus 1 there for 49 minus 3 for 87. So what's that? 37 years on net. Introduced in 1949 was a policy that required the holders of broadcast licenses both to present controversial issues of public importance and to do so in a manner that fairly reflected differing viewpoints. In 1987, the FCC said to hell with it and abolished the doctrine. I've skipped ahead here, but prompting some to urge its reintroduction through either commission policy or congressional legislation. Neither has happened really so far. The FCC removed the rule that implemented the policy from the Federal Register in August of 2011. So a little bit of background on that, just in case you were interested, and I'll include those links in the roundup, and you can do more reading if you feel like the Fairness Doctrine is a relevant part of your life. We'll see whether the FCC tries to make it one, and how we handle it from there on, and how the broadcasters handle it. And I hope they emulate Colbert's approach. Much more out there happening as well. The thing I mentioned yesterday that I think I'd like to go back to and discuss was the NATO shakeup, the commands in NATO, because I do think it's kind of important, and it's not really usually a part of our everyday experience, even with the military, with which we're mostly in a disconnect these days anyway. It sort of exists on its own plane, and if you are a member of the military or have a family member in the military, you're aware of what's going on there to some extent, and if you're not, you're just sort of disconnected from it entirely, which isn't a fantastic situation, honestly. And I don't know whether universal service is a good answer to that problem, if it even is a problem, but it has been discussed over the years, but along with the Fairness Doctrine, but never really addressed. And perhaps we're better off for it in the end. Anyway, the news I'm reading is from breakingdefense.com, which I assume has to do with breaking the news rather than actually breaking anyone's defenses. But this article from February 10th, written by Tim Martin. Thanks, Tim, for covering this story. NATO shakeup sees U.S. ousted from 2 war-fighting level commands. And not being day-to-day involved in the operations of the military, I'm not 100% sure what that's supposed to mean to us, war-fighting level. After all, our drunk-ass secretary of whatever we're calling him these days, Pete Hegseth, says that everybody's a war fighter, and they're constantly fighting wars, left and right. Everything they do is a war. Going to eat at the mess hall is a war because somebody might confront you with DEI on your way there or something like that. I don't know. But everybody's supposed to be a war fighter. But guess who's not allowed to be a war fighter anymore, at least not for NATO? And the answer is American brass, but not in all positions. So Tim Martin will explain it. The U.S. will hand over charge of Joint Force Command Norfolk to the United Kingdom and relinquish leadership of Joint Force Command Naples to Italy. So I guess that all makes sense. They're the locals in charge now. And this article is datelined Belfast. So another NATO installation there. NATO, I guess, because that's where they're covering from. NATO today announced a command restructuring plan that will see the U.S. giving up leadership of 2 allied operational level commands to European senior officers. And you can't have imagined that this wasn't happening, with the commander-in-chief of the United States Armed Forces making it a point to denounce NATO itself and leave people guessing as to what the American commitment to NATO actually is, plus threatening other NATO member nations militarily from time to time for political purposes. The U.S. will hand over charge of Joint Force Command Norfolk to the United Kingdom and relinquish leadership of Joint Force Command Naples to Italy, a statement from the alliance said. The statement also noted that Joint Force Command Brunssum, Brunssum, will now be led by Germany, as you might have guessed, and Poland on a rotational format. Sharing more details of the shakeup, the alliance said that changes involving a new distribution of senior officer responsibility were approved by allies last week. So European allies, including NATO's newest members, will play a more prominent role across leadership posts. And remember, Donald Trump's view of all of this is, well, the United States is providing all of the troops and material and commands, so everyone else should be providing money. They don't step up and do their part. So they said, all right, well, we'll just take over that part instead, and you guys take a walk. All right. As a result, all 3 Joint Force Commands, they are, it is noted here parenthetically, 4-star commands. That helps us determine or understand at what level we're talking about replacing Americans here. So as a result, all 3 Joint Force Commands, which are 4-star commands, which lead at the operational level in crisis and conflict, will be led by Europeans, added the statement. The alliance stressed that the U.S. will keep hold of the Supreme Allied Commander Europe, or SACEUR, post, currently occupied by General Alexis G. Grinkovich. Is it Grinkovich or Grinkowich? It's with a W, but I don't know how he pronounces it. General, let me know, please. Additionally, Washington is to lead all 3 theater component commands. So some technical jargon here that military types may or may not be familiar with in NATO structure. They'll continue to lead all 3 theater component commands, newly taking up responsibility for Allied Maritime Command and maintaining leadership of Allied Land Command and Allied Air Command. That gives us some idea of what's going on here, I think. The names are pretty self-explanatory. They're good with those. The sweeping changes are set to be gradually implemented over the coming years. That's enclosed in quotes, so I'm not sure what that means, coming years. And mark a shift to it says more fairly share. Mark a shift to more fairly share, there we are, responsibility within NATO. It'll be real interesting if Trump complains about this because, of course, Trump complained, we need a fairer share from NATO. All right, well, we'll do it. Oh, not like that. We want money, which is not what NATO is about. All right. That, according to the alliance, but they do come amid a troubling period for the 32-nation collective with questions surrounding its future. For instance, amid rhetoric from U.S. President Donald Trump that Greenland should be part of the United States, Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen said that if the U.S. attacked a NATO ally, it would be the end of the alliance. I think that makes a lot of sense. Trump later stated that he likely would not use force to take over the semi-autonomous Arctic island. Trump has insisted that control of Greenland is necessary for national security and Golden Dome planning, while criticizing European allies for not contributing enough to Arctic security. Did we cover Golden Dome and the weirdness of it? I think we must have at some point. I recall discussing the old SDI issue and kind of updating things from there. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte refused to comment on the Greenland issue when asked about it at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland last month, but acknowledged that efforts were taking place behind the scenes to reach a deal. Mark Rutte has a fine line to walk and has been doing his best to not unnecessarily antagonize or insult Trump, but also lead NATO through to the other side of this separation, I think. On Monday, U.S. Ambassador to NATO, Matthew Whitaker, you may remember him as once having been, I believe, the acting Attorney General of the United States, and has a side hustle in selling toilets for well-endowed men, which, you know, more or less I would have thought would be kind of the same, but maybe I'm just not up to it, and that's the problem. Really. Anyway, not something that I necessarily would have been interested in publicly involving myself if I were busy with the tasks of the Attorney General, of course. Anyway, he's moved on to be ambassador to NATO, and no doubt selling them lots of toilets. And you know how they mark up the toilets in the military. Anyway, he told a town hall meeting in Berlin that he was a jelly donut. He said there was a lot of great progress trilaterally that has been made in relation to negotiations over the Arctic island's future. Isn't that fantastic? You all remember, of course, JFK. He's related to RFK Jr., telling everyone that he was a jelly donut. Yes?
Hi, everybody. It's me, David, still your host for the Kagro in the Morning Show after all these years. Thank you for all your continuing support for the show. And if you're listening regularly and still thinking about getting on board as a supporter, well, the time is now. Patreon.com is the easiest way to make recurring subscription-style payments every month, all year round, to keep us going. patreon.com/KagroX brings you to our page where you can sign up with your monthly support. And hey, have you seen our clever new subscription tiers? It's easier than ever to sign up for, say, one crisp dollar bill for every information-packed 2-hour show. If you're the plan ahead type, there's even a year-long subscription program that saves you 15% on the cover price. Or it would if there was a cover price, or even a cover, for that matter. patreon.com/KAGROX. Thanks again for all your support.
All right, welcome back, everyone, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I think we're done with the NATO situation. Although, in case you didn't follow the reference, I think it's a fairly famous thing by now, but I just wanted to clear that up. But everyone, I think, has at least heard of JFK, the original one, not the JFK Jr. guy who, of course, QAnon believes is not dead and has been in hiding and is about to emerge from hiding and lead them to victory in national elections or something like that. I think they've kind of given that one up since. But anyway, JFK's famous speech to the Berlin crowd, letting them know that we had their back during the Cold War and the blockade of Berlin and the Berlin airlift and all of these things that we would never... This was about NATO solidarity, right? We would protect the Berlin enclave from the Soviet threat, or the communist threat, at least, of East Germany, and backed by the Soviets, and stand with them and ensure their continued freedom, and letting everybody know that he stood with them by telling them what he thought was, I'm a Berliner myself, just as you are. I consider myself a Berliner, so that's how strong our commitment to you is. And he delivered it in German, sort of, apparently. I'm not a German linguist, but I am assured that his phrasing of it, ich or it should have been Ich, I guess, but Ich bin ein Berliner. Which I guess he thought. He didn't have Google Translate available to him, though he did have the CIA and its translators available to him. So, but nobody did this. But I guess he thought he was, capable enough in German to say that Ich bin ein Berliner. I am ein Berliner. But apparently that usage helps modify and describe for German speakers whether you are saying you are a Berliner, a denizen of Berlin, which apparently would be said Ich bin Berliner, just bam, no article, Berliner. Ein Berliner tells everybody that you are the jelly donut named for the city, just as we have, for instance, sausages named for Frankfurt, the Frankfurter, the Hamburger, the Frankfurter, and the Berliner are local delicacies, I guess. I don't know. And so he let everybody know that one. And I assume they all said, ha ha ha. How do you write ha 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 in German? Do they just say H-A as well? I don't know. We'll have to check that one out. Anyway, they all had a small chuckle at that one and understood what he meant, that he was, in fact, a jelly donut. And so fact check, he's not. Anyway, I thought I'd catch you up on the news of the day. Let's see. Other news emerging today. I don't know if you've had a chance to hear about this Epstein fellow, Jeffrey Epstein, and the fallout among the various sectors in which he acted. But I found it interesting that Axios was finally coming around, I guess, to noting that the Epstein files are ending business and political careers across the globe. April Rubin picked up that story for them. I don't know if I have access to the story because I'm not an Axios subscriber, but I was wondering, I think Instapaper, that's perhaps one of the paywalls that Instapaper, enjoys getting around and helping us get coverage for. But, well, we'll see. Let me press a few buttons and see if here we go. Plus, we always love their formatting of things into why things matter. I always found that organization to be a little bit odd, and also that they tended to miss and what I would think the question is of why it matters. Like if they really answered the question for each of their articles, why it matters, first of all, it would double the length of the article, but it would provide important context. But usually it's stuff like why it matters, because people are talking about it, and that's what matters to us because we sell newspapers. Oh, that's not really it. Anyway, let's find out. The latest round of the Epstein files has effectively ended the careers of some of the world's most powerful figures, from captains of industry to prominent attorneys. Just nobody in the American government. That's the real underlying story here. But as each day passes, more and more names pop up as researchers pour over these documents, and everywhere you turn. In fact, here at home, just the running commentary of, I can't believe how many people and how many walks of life in which they've become famous, and you would have thought independently wealthy and or powerful in their own right and having no need of connection to Jeffrey Epstein. How many people nonetheless have those connections? But it's one of those, things where somebody with lots and lots of money reaches out to a famous person who would otherwise have nothing to do with them. And at the very least, they can say, a recording artist, I'll pay you $1 million to play at my birthday party or something dumb like that. Yeah, money opens those doors. Well, anyway, the latest round of the Epstein files apparently ending careers everywhere. Oh, and by the way, who was the guy we were mentioning yesterday? Greg brought him up, but who's got the talent agency? Casey Wasserman. That's it. He's mentioned in the article down here. And is there mention of what's going on with him here? Yes. Okay. It's in here, so I'll just read you the rundown from Axios so that you're up to date on the names that made a big enough splash to make it into Axios yesterday. But you'll still be a day behind here. But right up front is their why it matters thing. And it's just so interesting sometimes to think, well, let's go see whether they even are in the ballpark of why The Epstein files matter. The revelations aren't stopping, with new names and new recriminations coming to light every day. That's period. That's why it matters. Why does it matter? Because it's going to drive another news cycle. That's why Axios thinks it matters. Not, it's wrong to do this to people. This is another erosion of civic life, to carry Josh Marshall's point that we read you yesterday forward a little bit more, like a reminder. This is not the way people are supposed to interact with one another in any capacity. Certainly none of the abuse, but none of the cover-up, none of the secrecy, none of the weird star effing weirdness, such that money that should have nothing to do with a famous model or recording artist or brilliant professor somehow ingratiates itself and worms its way into that life. And that these sorts of deals are okay, as opposed to, well, you and I have a common interest and we go into business together. That's something, I guess, versus that guy has money, so I'll just go to his house or his island and vacation there or something. It's a very weird erosion of normal, everyday, open civic life. Anyway, driving the news is the next section. The Justice Department released its final tranche of Epstein files. That's doing a lot of work there, too. I think the Justice Department probably doesn't even mean it when it says this, and they'll end up having to release more. But I think their hope is, we're going to say that this is it. This is the final tranche that we're going to release. And I do believe that they said that was the case one tranche ago. And then everybody said, what are you talking about? And they said, well, all right, we've only released half the files. And then somebody found out, no, actually we've only released 1% of the files. So now they've released about 2% of the files, but now they're saying, well, that's it, though. We're definitely not going to release any more, because I don't know why. They don't feel like it. They just want to jerk your chain for a while. They want to drag this thing out. They want to create a popular demand for the next tranche, which is going to be the Bill Clinton tranche or something. I'm not certain what they're aiming at, but they keep saying this is it. And it's nowhere near, by most reports, what their obligations are under the law, the newly adopted law at that. So we'll see what Thomas Massie has to say about that one. That'll be, let's make that, though, the only area in which we accept, currently at least, until there's more proven, leadership from Thomas Massie on anything. Anyway, the Justice Department released what it's going to claim is its final tranche of Epstein files in late January, so that didn't even happen last week, revealing connections between the convicted sex offender and disgraced financier and some of the world's most powerful political and business figures. In the U.S., Tom Pritzker announced his retirement as executive chair at Hyatt Hotels on Monday, effective immediately, and expressed regret about his past association with Epstein and convicted associate Ghislaine Maxwell, who's serving a 20-year prison sentence related to sex trafficking, i.e. related to Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking. Just say it. Let's see, a comment here from them. Good stewardship also means protecting Hyatt, particularly in the context of my association with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, which I deeply regret, said the billionaire Hyatt heir, who confirmed he would not stand for re-election to the company's board. Makes sense. Good for business. Shareholders would be mad. Also, he's sitting on a pile of a couple $2 billion that can't be, I guess, wrested away from him. So why not? That's a fairly reasonable approach to things, except for the fact that he's got the billions of dollars and gets to keep it. I exercise terrible judgment in maintaining contact with them, and there is no excuse for failing to distance myself sooner. I condemn the actions and the harm caused by Epstein and Maxwell, and I feel deep sorrow for the pain they inflicted on their victims. Brad Karp is the next one up. He's was the chairman of top corporate law firm Paul Weiss for 18 years, and he resigned after his emails with Epstein were revealed in the files. And I think we made mention of the fact when we first brought his name up that Paul Weiss was one of the first of the white shoe corporate law firms to knuckle under to Trump's weird demands for free legal representation for I don't know who, but pretty much anyone he wants to throw it to, I guess, is his view of how this would work. And so I don't know. Paul Weiss probably thought that they might be called upon to do some sort of pro bono work for, I don't know, maybe perhaps the campaign or the Republican National Committee, or perhaps helping with some sort of appellate amicus brief or something like that. But I think Trump's idea is more like, I want your top lawyers to work for free for the pillow guy, Mike Lindell, and springing him from, whatever legal trouble he might be in. Or I need you to write the memo convincing me to pardon Ghislaine Maxwell, or something like that. Or I'm being sued over World Liberty Financial and I want you to take care of that. He just wants personal service from them. I don't know if he's ever going to get it. I don't know if any of those deals are ever going to, if he's ever going to be able to call those favors in, but he's having a great time making the claim that he's got them, by the short ones, as they used to say when they talked about things like that. All right, so Brad Karp's situation. Recent reporting has created a distraction and has placed a focus on me that is not in the best interest of the firm. Paul Weiss, under Karp, was the first law firm to strike a deal offering pro bono work after President Trump targeted attorneys representing his political foes. Greg also mentioned Kathy Rumler, top counsel at Goldman Sachs, resigned after her emails with Epstein surfaced showing their close relationship and her downplaying his sex crimes, per AP. So that ain't great. Rumler had served as White House counsel to former President Obama. Previously, she tried to distance herself from that correspondence. Then Casey Wasserman, he becomes important again because, here he is, and we get to read this other bullet point that I was going to tell you before. He is a high-profile Hollywood talent agent who chairs the LA 28 Olympic Committee. That's what's of interest. And he said he would sell his agency after his Epstein ties were disclosed. Greg made mention of that yesterday. I think what might have driven it was here high-profile clients, including pop star Chappell Roan and soccer player Abby Wambach, left the agency following the revelations. And, of course, he also faces pressure to step down as Olympic chair, but the LA 28 Executive Committee has stood by him. That may finally be coming to an end. It really ought to. I think the mayor has called on them for that as well in the last day or two. I was a little puzzled by the idea of selling his talent agency, just only because obviously he needs to retire and get out of the business because all of his clients are leaving. But if his clients are leaving, how do you sell the agency, I guess? And while you could say, well, I'm leaving, and so the taint of my association with the agency, which is named after him, I think, it is going to go away, and you'll get to keep the portfolio of clients. But if the clients, to the extent that they're celebrities and have their own power, I don't really know that they're going to say, well, I'll just stay with the same people. I guess if they have a relationship with the actual agent that represents them and the agent was not in the Epstein files, you could say, we have this long-standing relationship. But I have a feeling that it's just a breakup of everything, right? I don't know who's going to buy out that thing with the expectations that all the clients and all the agents will just stay. They can just freelance it and go elsewhere, or, join another talent agency, or I don't know what pop stars or what would make them say they want to stay. There's always a personal relationship somewhere, but I have a feeling that I'll just sell it thing isn't going to work out the way it would with a company with inherent value of its own or some product line that it offers. Anyway, Peter Attia, also on the list, a longevity influencer. I don't know how long he's been a longevity influencer, but I assume he's got long-term plans for it. Stepped down as chief science officer of David Protein. Is that right? What a fortuitous name for Mr. Protein. I imagine that's not actually. So the name of the company is David. They're the ones that make the bars. I just saw those in the store and said, oh, cool, it's got my name on it. Anyway, he's no longer listed as an advisor at 8 Sleep, which is, I don't know what, but I guess they had a big day yesterday with the President's Day mattress sales. However, CBS News appears to be keeping Attia as a contributor, multiple outlets reported. Surprise, surprise. Steve Tisch, chairman and co-owner of the New York Giants, being investigated by the NFL. Commissioner Roger Goodell said earlier this month. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, of course, faces bipartisan calls to resign after the Epstein files revealed a closer relationship than previously indicated. Over in Europe, Peter Mandelson, former British ambassador to the U.S., who also resigned from the House of Lords, is being investigated by the Metropolitan Police in London. House Oversight Dems have asked Mandelson to answer questions as part of their Epstein probe. His name appeared thousands of times in the files. And of course, in September, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer dismissed Mandelson because of his Epstein ties. Morgan McSweeney, who said he advised Starmer to appoint Mandelson, resigned as the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff this month. Thorbjorn Jagland, Norway's former Prime Minister, was charged with aggravated corruption following a police probe into his Epstein ties. He has denied wrongdoing. Extra points there, though, for Norway during the Winter Olympics, using Deck the Halls with Boughs of Holly as their national anthem. So everyone will have sympathy for them. That's not actually what it is, but you would be surprised what AI slop will tell you about that situation if you go looking for why the two songs sound similar. Norwegian police are investigating whether Jagland received gifts, travel, and loans due to his position. Jack Lang, a French politician and former culture minister, resigned from the Arab World Institute in Paris due to his association with Epstein. Lang's financial ties to Epstein prompted an investigation into possible tax fraud. And in the Middle East, you all have heard this one already. This was Sultan Ahmed bin Sulayem in Dubai, which is having a moment with chocolate, which is actually from Turkey, but there you have it. He was replaced as chairman and CEO of logistics company DP World, and they are port constructors and operators, some of the largest port installations around the world, and actually something of some concern all by itself, quite honestly, and I think we've called that name out before in the past, not because of this. He's got the most concerning link, I guess, of almost anybody at this point, with Epstein having written to the Sultan, "I loved the torture video," in a 2019 email. I suppose we could cling to the hope that we don't really know exactly what that was supposed to mean, but I think we all imagine it was something horrific, and it probably was. The recipient's name was previously redacted, but guess what? We now know who it is. And can you imagine, though, summing all of that up as why all of that matters? Well, it matters because there's new names coming out every day. I feel like there's a deeper meaning to all of it and why it matters. Okay, other news of the day. This one almost certainly caught your eye last night if you were on social media. We've mentioned in the past, how disturbing and horrific Kristi Noem is as a human being, and the fact that she's in a romantic relationship, allegedly, with Corey Lewandowski, who previously, on his own and entirely independently, was one of the worst people in the world as well. And now, oh my God, they might merge their gene pools. But I think they're going to avoid that issue for now. But it's a possibility. And we're learning more about the possibility every day as we hear more about their romantic entanglements and the lengths to which they are going in order to facilitate them. Also in the news has been discussion of the fact that Kristi Noem has been a rather demanding prima donna in the travel arena, insisting at first on having at her beck and call as DHS secretary some Coast Guard military aircraft, or military operated aircraft, but generally speaking, private jets, to fly her around the country and, maybe take a guest or two, like maybe Corey Lewandowski and whatever they can pack into their leather suitcase. Anyway, the one he was traveling back and forth between their apartments with, until, of course, they moved on to a naval base so they could be behind a military security wall so that people couldn't see them sneaking into one another's homes and, in fact, ending up in living in one home, the one that was supposed to be occupied by the commandant of the Coast Guard. Anywho, she apparently thinks that jet is not luxurious enough, and they have since been leasing a 737, I think, a super luxury private jet that very few billionaires find affordable to operate and own. Anyway, and this is apparently super luxury, and they're going to buy one or two of these jets outright rather than continuing to lease them. And apparently that funding, like ICE's funding, multi-year funding, was tucked into that stupid thing called the One Big Beautiful Bill. And guess what? We now have finally found a new name for it, owing to the description of what's in this jet. What are the specs for Kristi Noem's luxury airborne love palace? This from the News Not Noise Substack of Jessica Yellen. And I guess it's her operation because it's called News Not Noise Jessica Yellen .substack.com. Jessica has a co-byline here on this piece with Rowan Montgomery, who gives us let them fly first class, as opposed to let them eat cake, right? Let them fly first class. Kristi Noem's DHS luxury jet scandal. The subheader says, inside Noem's flying palace. Now, she's the second in the Trump administration to come up with a flying palace, right? Trump got one from the government of Qatar not that long ago, or the royal family of Qatar. Same thing, of course, in Qatar. Plus, the Pentagon demands obedient, deadly AI. We won't get to that part, but just to let you know what else they're rounding up on News Not Noise. There's also the race to deploy untested nuclear reactors. Hooray, that sounds really good. Lawmakers move to rein in presidential pardons. That would be of some interest. And remembering Robert Duvall, which we haven't done to this point except mentioning that we remember that he's dead, but we haven't done a nice roundup of his career, and we won't. It's not our business, and you get a better one elsewhere. So, all right, here's what they have. Today, that is to say yesterday, we lead, that is to say led, with something sure to capture your imagination, the interior of Kristi Noem's new billionaire-class luxury jet, complete with two, how many? Two bidets, and a wet bar with a wine chiller. It's not the presence of the bidet that makes this a wet bar, but it could be if they really wanted to save space on board. But golly, that would be even more disturbing than what has just been described to us. Two bidets. And lots of people throwing back to SNL's fake commercial thing about the dual toilet seats, I think was once advertised. Two bidets. I assume they're in separate places, but it immediately brought to mind that, well, gee, I guess you got to have two because I guess Corey Lewandowski must like them too, which, it's a thing. And by the way, there are vocal bidet evangelists out there who say, hey, you'll never go back. It'll change your life. And that's as may be. I'm just saying that I think Corey Lewandowski has done a lot of work trying to cultivate this idea of him as the kind of guy who would try to punch you in the face if you suggested that he needed a bidet at all, anywhere, much less on his private jet. And they may not be for him. I don't know. But it seems like an interesting inclusion in an aircraft. But there's more. I mean, I don't know that that's necessarily the most outrageous, but it's certainly the funniest sounding of the accoutrement aboard the Flying Love Palace. This all happening, of course, on your dime, because the funding comes from the slush fund that Congress approved in the One Big Beautiful Bill, which can now at least be called the Two Big Beautiful Bidets Bill, because that's the star of the legislation as far as I'm concerned. Noem's agency isn't alone in pushing boundaries. Today we also report, this is the other stories, on the Pentagon threatening an AI company that tried to limit deadly uses of its technology, and the Department of Energy's rush to get mini nuclear reactors operational ASAP. That does sound like a bad idea, though. Let's see. We'll get down to the luxury jet scandal and do a little bit of reading both here and outside. High on Your Dime is the name of this bullet point headline for them. The DHS luxury jet scandal. DHS this weekend scrambled to defend its plans to purchase a luxury Boeing 737 MAX jet for $70 million. A spokesperson, so it's probably Tricia McLaughlin, claimed the plane would be used for deportation flights, which supposedly, quote, saves the American taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars. That's not what the official documents say, of course, but they state that the plane is specifically for high-profile deportations. I don't know who they're deporting in such style. So Kristi Noem's DHS joins Rupert Murdoch, Mukesh Ambani, one of the world's richest men, apparently, that we don't know the name of, but it's there, Mukesh Ambani, and Tony Robbins as the owner of this type of luxury mega jet. Like, most billionaires won't spend that much on such a big plane. We obtained the floor plans for the aircraft, which DHS staff reportedly call Secretary Kristi Noem's big, beautiful jet. She really loves usurping his stuff, like we read the other day in that profile of her, that she likes to call together her top advisors and call it a cabinet meeting. And apparently, by some reports, that really upsets Trump. So calling this the big, beautiful jet is only going to make him mad, too. It appears to be a flying palace. A sales listing brags that this Boeing 737 MAX redefines luxury travel and caters to the most discerning of travelers, offering an exquisite flying experience like no other. Here's what your tax dollars are going toward: what they're calling a VVIP cabin configuration. Not just a VIP, a VVIP. And you know what it means. It does, in fact, stand for very, very important person. Seating just 17 passengers on a massive Boeing 737. It includes 2 private bedroom suites. That's more than they actually need, I think. 2 private bedroom suites with queen-sized beds, 2 showers. And by the way, in prior administrations, even the First Lady's aircraft did not have even a single shower in it. Hers will have 2, and again, probably more than they need. Multiple bathrooms with electric bidets, which sounds awfully dangerous, right? If you thought Trump was worried about electric boats, what's he going to have to say about an electric bidet? A separate buffet bar, multiple Ultra HD TVs, and a lounge with a wet bar and wine chiller. You can take a look online and get a virtual tour of the place. Wow. It is really something. And to think that they were trying to pass off that they would be doing deportations on this plane. All right. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Wow. The ultra luxury 737 MAX jet that, I guess Kristi Noem and Corey Lewandowski will be sharing in the skies. But the big news of the day, now the 2 electric bidets included in all this. And thinking about that description, right, this is the 2 ultra luxury bedrooms. So there's 2 queen beds, 2 showers, 2 bathrooms with electric, I don't know why I say electric bidets. We got to go back to steam. The steam bidets are the ones that we really, you got to look out for the steam bidets. Be careful if the wires get crossed there. But, the electromagnetic bidets, just don't do it. So all of this, the idea that, once again, a good measure of, when I say that Tricia McLaughlin's one of the most craven liars in the business, I'm serious and I mean it. Imagine telling people this is going to save the taxpayers money because we're also going to use this for deportations. Well, what kind of deportations need 2 bidets? They don't even have toilets in the jails you're keeping people in. What do they need bidets for? Much less electric bidets. Top of the line. And the answer is no. Nobody's going to be deported on this plane. But maybe it'll be for high profile deportations. Well, of who? Saudi royals? We don't do that. Plus, their planes are better already. Did we deport, meaning return the former president of Honduras to his home country in a plane like this? Of course not. That, she gets annoyed when her blanket doesn't get transferred from one plane to the other. The idea that somebody who's just coming out of prison is going to be using her bidet on the way back to their home country in a deportation. There's no deportations going on in something like this. But the idea that they were somehow going to be saving taxpayers' money by, now this is a bidet joke to some extent, by making sure that this flying luxury palace does How many bidets? 2 bidets. Double duty, if you will, in the air. Why? For not only flying Kristi Noem and Corey Lewandowski around in style as if they needed that sort of style. And by the way, I mean, they're not doing any 24-hour jaunts around the world that they need all this bathroom luxury. Stuff that the First Lady never even got. But yeah, so allegedly doing double duty as a deportation plane. No effing way. That's one of the worst, dumbest lies ever, and I think they told it just to see if anyone would print it. And they did. So here we are. Let's see. Oh, there's some bolding here. The description of the place. You heard about it. Multiple bathrooms with electric bidets, separate buffet bar, and I do hope it's very far separated from the bidet. You should hope it would be separate, don't you think? Separate from the bathroom. Multiple Ultra HD TVs. Trump would, of course, agree with that. And a lounge with a wet bar and a wine chiller. Take a look here. You can go and look at discover.matterport.com and take a look inside the plane and then ask yourself, does this scream deportation efficiency or Barbie's dream plane? And the answer is Barbie dream plane if you haven't looked yet. Then this note here, you have to spend money to spend money. What do they mean? The $70 million for Kristi Noem's luxury jet, which doesn't include the millions it likely costs to operate. That's just, I can now buy it, and now I'm on hook for tens of millions of dollars a year just maintaining the thing, is a fraction of the taxpayer funds that she's burning through on aircraft alone. Last fall, DHS purchased 2 Gulfstream G700 jets for between $172 and $200 million for the Coast Guard. Now, those are the jets that they normally allow the DHS secretary to use. So we're talking about they already had 2 Gulfstream 700s. Why does she also want a Boeing 737 MAX? And the answer is it's got bidets, 2 of them. And we'll let some other Coast Guard people who we displaced from their houses occasionally fly around on the Gulfstreams instead. Officials insisted they needed to replace the Coast Guard's older Gulfstream jet as, quote, a matter of safety. You know, I get when the electric bidet gets buggy, you know, you got to replace the plane. She's been on a jet shopping spree, they say. In December, Noem and her de facto chief of staff, and then some. That's what they put parenthetically, and there's a link to, the story about her and Corey Lewandowski. But she and her de facto chief of staff, Corey Lewandowski, directed DHS to buy 10 Boeing 737 jets from the bankrupt Spirit Airlines for deportation and their own travel, despite officials reportedly warning them that they would be more expensive than simply contracting for flights. So I don't know who owns Spirit Airlines or who brokered the deal, but they probably got a cut of that. I guess if you really think they need to accomplish this deportation mission, they're going to need planes, but that doesn't mean you need to own them. Hold it. Why build, right? You could lease for half the cost, and there's lots of ways to handle that. For instance, Spirit Airlines, which owns the planes, you could pay them. I think they're in the business of being paid for carrying people through the air. You could probably have made that work. And if they didn't want to be associated with deportations, they could spin off an LLC and handle the deportations there. But instead, they're going to buy the aircraft. And just like getting a quote-unquote free $400 million plane from Qatar and then remaking it into a Flying Palace Air Force One or a replica for Trump to take with him when he leaves office, that too will cost $1 billion just to fix this thing up. This was another boondoggle, of course. Anyway, apparently doesn't matter because the deal collapsed at some point when it became clear that Spirit didn't actually own the planes. That is an excellent scam. Would you like to buy the Brooklyn Bridge? I don't actually own that, but you might need it to make deportees walk over it. Well, anyway, Spirit didn't own the planes. The planes didn't own engines. How do you like that? So what a deal this was. They were, what did they say they were paying? Up to $200 million for 2 Gulfstream jets, and then an unknown amount of money for 10 737s from Spirit Airlines, who did not own the planes, and the planes didn't have any engines, and I think they got ripped off. Apparently undeterred, though, Noem and Lewandowski subsequently directed DHS to purchase 6 Boeing 737 planes for deportations at a cost of almost $140 million. The only thing missing is Imelda Marcos's shoe collection. Yeah, wow, there you go. All right, the other stories that they mentioned about the Pentagon and AI we'll save for another day. Perhaps we'll turn back around and cover those at some point. That and the mini unregulated nuclear power plants that they're building around the country. Well, golly, I don't know. Here's what jumps out at me is this quote. Oh, all right. Well, it doesn't mean what I thought it meant. So never mind. We'll skip over that one. DHS shutdown is mentioned here because that does continue. And I think we're in day 4 of the DHS shutdown. Both the House and Senate in recess for this week, so no plans to reopen the DHS, but I guess everything's fine because there's so much money socked away for them in the 2 big, beautiful bidets bill that they're able to keep ICE, at least, operating through all of this, and probably a few other branches of DHS as well. But it does continue, the shutdown, with lawmakers on either side, that is to say both of them, seemingly dug in and away from Capitol Hill. There's no end in sight. About 90% of DHS employees are still working, so that's not going to disturb them a great deal. Many without pay, and of course, Corey Lewandowski and Kristi Noem don't care about that. ICE and CBP are working with pay thanks to the $75 billion slush fund earmarked in Trump's now called 2 Big Beautiful Bidets Act. But the DHS's Office of the Inspector General, which is investigating ICE's use of excessive force and facial recognition technology, warned that the shutdown has forced it to suspend 85% of its audits, evaluations, and inspections. How do you like that? All right. Oh, right. There was some mention of a restriction on pardons, something to keep an eye on. Representative Don Bacon, now, of course, retiring from his role as one of Trump's chief Republican critics in the House. Anyway, he says he became the first Republican lawmaker to sign on to the Pardon Integrity Act, an amendment, a constitutional amendment that would let Congress nullify presidential pardons. By the way, there's been another round of presidential pardons. On Thursday, Trump pardoned 5 former NFL players convicted of crimes like counterfeiting and drug trafficking. But it's important, of course, that he pardoned them because reasons, and I'm not certain what those reasons are, but they don't seem to be very good ones. Anyway, we'll be following up on that story, I'm sure, in the future as the pardons get worse, more plentiful, and harder to explain in a democratic civic society. All right. Others of some interest, as the federal government continues on the ICE-related and deportation-related shopping spree, not just jets, there's something new to add to the picture here. And let's see, did I put aside, I feel like there was something else alongside this that, oh, right, okay, no, that was a different story. So we'll continue on with this one. But where's our source here? MonroeLocal.org. Who are we looking at? Where is Monroe? I'm not certain what local news source we're looking at, but it's surely must be Georgia. Local to the there's a big story going on with the land and warehouse-sized facilities that ICE is buying, or allegedly buying, or trying to buy all over the country, supposedly for conversion into if they're not ready for it yet, or use at some point for detention centers, which I guess, I mean, it's not a great euphemism, detention center, because you kind of know what's going on there, but I guess because they don't want to use the word concentration camp in all of this, they're going with detention centers. But they're buying these enormous facilities with the intent of literally warehousing tens of thousands of detainees at each of these places. It's the sort of infrastructure that people who dismissed the idea that they were really going to try to deport even 10 million people, much less now bragging on deporting 100 million people, everyone of color from the United States, apparently, to be deported, according to DHS's own social media feed, which is another story about the weird Nazi-esque figures running that. We haven't even got to that. But anyway, they're purchasing these places all over the country, and it's been a little bit of interesting pushback on a small percentage of them along the way. But this story, as I recall in my skimming of it, also touches on what I thought might be usable as pushback on something. Maybe it's just Georgia where this doesn't work, but I've been saying, local governments ought to immediately be moving to rezone these areas. They very frequently will rezone something. If there's something you wanted built someplace or you thought would be a good idea, so maybe somebody wants to put up a solar panel array or something like that, even if it's only on their own property, not a solar farm per se, and then the local conservatives in local government will quickly rezone something with a special designation that forbids the use of solar arrays, rooftop solar arrays, but only in this special business area for some reason, and just use the power of government to get in the way and frustrate people's purpose. And how come that doesn't work or couldn't work to frustrate the purpose of ICE? Well, of course, if they're local conservatives running the government, they, in many cases, won't want to get in the way of ICE's mission. Although if they're true conservatives, sometimes they do. And sometimes they do come out. Anyway, a lot of local activity to try to block the purchase from going through or becoming effective, or for the redesign of these sites to make them effective for use as detention centers or whatever you want to call them. So I'm encouraged by seeing at least some movement on this front. However, here's a new one. We've seen that. We've seen not rezoning per se, but other local activity seeking to, simply block or to push through a bill in the state legislature forbidding the use of this facility or of any facility within, X number of feet of a school, for instance, even if the number of feet is 10 billion, for use as a detention center. We've also seen a few private sector actions like this of people who have tentatively agreed to the sale to the federal government, then discovering what the purpose actually was and utilizing that period that they have, usually by state law or by the contracts that they've negotiated, to renege on the deal and say simply, no thanks, after all, we won't be taking the money. We're not selling to you for this purpose. So all sorts of pushback. This from Monroe Local news.monroelocal.org. I'm going to click through on some of these about pages to see if I can get some description of what we're looking at here. Your local news covering Loganville, Monroe, Walton County, and East Gwinnett County, I guess, down in Georgia. This has to do with the warehouse in the name of the locality stands out. So you may have seen it mentioned in the news. Social Circle, Georgia. I mean, that's such an odd name that it may have jumped out at you. Financial details surrounding the sale of a warehouse in Social Circle to the United States government have been made available. Thank you, Evan Newton, for the Covington News reporting for us here. According to a deed obtained by reporters, probably including Evan Newton, the U.S. government paid $128,555,500 to PNKS1 LLC to purchase a 235-acre lot at 1365 East Hightower Trail. The lot currently contains a warehouse that is expected to be used as a U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement detention facility. The facility could house 5,000 to 10,000 detainees. That is a wide range, by the way, of numbers, which could effectively triple the population of Social Circle. That's pretty interesting all by itself. And also, so sometimes some of the pushback in all of this is blessed NIMBYism, right? Not in my backyard, NIMBY. Usually got a negative connotation, but you might think that, for instance, I don't know what you would guess the demographics or the social zeitgeist of Social Circle, Georgia might be, but it feels a little small townish. Right now we have some idea of how big the town is. If you were to put 10,000 detainees in it, you would triple the population of Social Circle, which tells us that the population of Social Circle is around, 3,000 or so residents. And my guess, I'm going to guess, they're kind of white, maybe? And it might be of some concern if you said, even though they'll be in a detention center, like let's say things don't work out very well, and the government, Trump's government, flubs the mission, let's say, and they lose control of / break out of this detention center. 10,000 people who have been shackled and under lock and key, deprived of basic human rights and humane conditions, no electric bidets at all available to them, and now on the loose in Social Circle, Georgia. Now, I don't usually want to be the one to make them panic about such things. I don't want to fan the flames of race-driven fears, but if it'll help not build this thing, maybe, you use it as a tool. But anyway, that's not the story here. What you might have guessed is the story is that price tag. It's a big price tag, but I don't know, and you might not know offhand. Well, how much does it cost to buy a 235-acre lot with a warehouse on it that could be converted to hold up to 10,000 detainees? What's the asking price of a facility like that these days? Or you may have said, who's PNK S1? There's a space in there, PNK space S1, so separate, not words, but whatever. PNK S1 LLC. LLC just raises eyebrows these days when you see things like that, especially if you've never heard of this business and they're going to have a $128 million payday. Well, that's where the story lies. In a PT 61 tax form, a tax form used for real estate transfers, dated February 3rd, the intended use of the property was listed as, quote, commercial. Now, here you have a zoning issue, right? Commercial use for this. What's the commerce? Oh, humans. That's trafficking, and you can't do it. That's not commercial use. Neither is federal government ownership consistent with commercial use. So maybe the zoning law helps you, but maybe not. As the new owners of the property, the federal government will not be subject to many of the conditions that private owners are, such as property taxes. That's another NIMBY problem for Social Circle. At the site's inception in 2022, I guess when they started to build that warehouse there, Social Circle officials estimated it could bring close to $1 million in annual property tax revenue. I'll bet there was some NIMBY objection at the time to building this site, and they probably placated or tried to play down the concerns that people had by saying, well, it will bring $1 million in tax revenue to our tiny little town. And now it won't. And it'll probably end up costing the place money, and it'll make people worried. What are we going to do with 10,000 detainees who are only going to make more anxious and desperate by bringing them here and housing them here? And what if the incompetent idiots who are in charge of everything in the Trump administration prove equally incompetent in administering this prison? Well, tough luck. Now, they're also, interestingly,
I don't know whether it's just Georgia or this is the case everywhere. This would affect what I've been calling for, right? If this is true everywhere. They are also not subject to any local or state zoning laws, meaning that the planned detention center facility does not have to adhere to laws set by the Social Circle City Council or Planning Commission. Hopefully that's not the case everywhere. But, I'm not in zoning law deep enough to know whether this is the case or not, but it might be something people want to revisit or challenge at some point and see whether it holds up or whether indeed this is true, whether the reporters have got it right. It may just be something that Tricia McLaughlin tells reporters. Oh yeah, we don't have to pay any attention to zoning laws. That's local garbage. We're the federal government. Well, I don't know. We'll see about that. Now though, you may still be saying, yeah. But the $128 million price tag, can we hear more about that? Sure. The sale comes nearly 3 whole long years, after PNK purchased the property. 3 years ago, PNK S1 LLC. What did they pay for it 3 years ago? $29,392,500. They bought it from Walton Leaf LLC, another LLC, but at least kind of has, a name that might tell you something about someone. They bought that in 2023 for $29.3 million. They just sold it to the federal government for $128.5 million. What's going on here? I don't want to be the first to suggest money laundering, but that's okay because I wouldn't be the first to suggest that it's money laundering no matter when I say it, because it's already been said. Wow. That's quite a jump from $29.3 million 3 years later to $128.5 million. Why? No one knows. In 2024, the property was valued by the Walton County Tax Assessor's Office at we'll round up, $3.3 million. 2024, I know it's ancient history. That's like almost 2 years ago at some point. This year it'll become 2 years. However, that number did jump to $29.7 million of assessment in 2025 when the warehouse neared completion. So, okay, unimproved, and I don't think that the warehouse has improved anything. Unimproved, the 235 acres in Georgia, $3.3 million. With a warehouse on it, $29.7 million. How much did the government pay for it now that we have Dodgy making sure that we don't do any waste, fraud, and abuse? $128.5 million. Could warrant an investigation. This means that the federal government paid PNK nearly $100 million more than the 2025 assessment. Talks of the PNK warehouse becoming an ICE detention center first began in December of 2025 when the Washington Post reported that the federal government was eyeing the site in Social Circle. On February 4th, the city of Social Circle posted on its Facebook page, which is not where they should be handling federal government business anymore because Facebook is a cesspool, that the federal government was in the process of purchasing the property. In the post, which that is to say the post on Facebook, which included information given to the city by the office of 10th Congressional District Representative Mike Collins, the city said that the Department of Homeland Security had already begun evaluating the site. However, city officials have remained insistent that they have not been directly contacted by the federal government despite numerous attempts to contact them. On February 8th, the city said it was informed by multiple sources that the sale had been completed. By the way, no mention here of a concept I've become aware of just by being a resident of close-ish in D.C. suburbs, that typically, though there is no local property taxes paid by the federal government when they obtain property, there are what they call PILT, payments in lieu of taxes, that the localities work out with the federal government, and I have seen no mention of any such payment in lieu of the $1 million estimated tax dollars that the site was supposed to bring in to Social Circle, and no mention of anybody's awareness of their entitlement to it. Anyway, local officials
I'm sorry, I skipped over a part here. The sale has drawn criticism from both sides of the political aisle, and Democratic Senator John Ossoff has released multiple statements, including one with Social Circle Mayor David Keener expressing his opposition to the facility. Exactly what you would expect to see from Ossoff. Collins added that while he supported ICE's mission, Collins, I've lost track of who Collins. Oh, yeah, right. Mike Collins, the representative of the 10th district there. While he supported ICE's mission, he was concerned, like Susan Collins, every Collins is apparently concerned about everything, that the facility would place a strain on the city's infrastructure. Yeah, it might at that. Local officials from Social Circle, Newton, and Walton counties have all opposed the implementation of the facility. Good on you. We'll see if it does any good.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, a.k.a. Darwin_Darko, a.k.a. the most reasonable man in America, a.k.a. KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen versus Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. I was just poking around to see whether we might be able to figure out a little bit more about the ownership of this parcel of land, having been obscured by an LLC name. And I think we've got some leads on this, and boy, oh boy, you'll never guess who people think, anyway, own this property. But let's see if we can get back to the story we were reading about this. It's lost in the very many tabs that I have open about it. But let's see if I can't find my way back to it. Of course not. Why would that happen? How did this come to be that our most important of these tabs ended up closed? All right, well, let's go back to Instapaper, and I guess we'll open it up all over again. I'm not sure why we lost this tab along the course of the... I bet it is open elsewhere. There it is. Okay, I found my way back to it. All right, just hidden, and I had to scroll around a little bit in order to find it. So as we said, we learned that Mike Collins, I guess, has got some genetic tie to Susan Collins up there in Maine, because all he had to say was that he was somehow concerned that the facility in Social Circle would place a strain on the city's infrastructure. Again, in addition to tripling the population of Social Circle, right? It's probably worthwhile mentioning that even though they'll only have 1 or 2 toilets probably for all 10,000 of the detainees in this place, it'll be, of course, flushing constantly because people will be queuing up for its use. I am sure that between water, electricity, heat, if they ever use it, air conditioning, if they ever use it, I don't know that they're really going to bother air conditioning this thing. It is, after all, a concentration camp. But yes, it will place some demands on the city's infrastructure. And remember that Republicans insist that we're deporting all these people because of their strain on resources here in the United States. So instead of having them not really straining resources in major cities around the country where, most of the work is, Instead, they will be straining the resources of quaint little towns like Social Circle, about which I know nothing, of course. But they may be right about that, along with the concerned Congressman Collins, that this strain will happen. Local officials from Social Circle, Newton, and Walton counties, right, we mentioned, have also all opposed the implementation of the facility. Apparently, it's said in other articles to be coming online in April for actual detentions happening there. Several other local activist groups and citizens have even held protests throughout recent weeks. Despite this, it appears that the ICE facility will be implemented as planned. Detainees could start being housed at the facility as soon as April. Oh, we didn't have to go elsewhere to find that. According to the city's February 4th Facebook post. I'm just sort of interested in taking a look at a map and locating Social Circle, Georgia on that map. I'm doing that now as I press this button. Oh, look, it's almost circular in its form, although I see must have been altered along the way. But Social Circle is about like a semicircle, and then with the little bumps jutting out here and there to trace, politically convenient road routes. Then it becomes a little less circular to its southwestern side, and then its southeastern side, it goes kablooey. It's been gerrymandered in some way, and there's weird enclaves. It's very odd. Anyway, what I was really looking for was overall where in Georgia it is. So it's kind of due east of Atlanta, southwest of Athens. So, I don't know if that tells us anything about it, but so we'll say because Atlanta area, that makes it kind of northwestern Georgia, not far northwestern Georgia, far enough up into the 14th district, previously represented by murdery Trader Green. Anyway, give you some idea of what's going on there. Sort of, I guess you could say central Georgia. It's about that. I don't know whether that's how you would refer to the region or not. Anyway, so I was wondering, as you perhaps were, whether or not there was any information available on who is going to pocket the $128 million payday for this $25 million property. I saw a couple of interesting things come up in the search for it. What I've landed on here is the Atlanta Journal-Constitution's reporting, and we'll see whether they have anything to say about this. ICE to begin detaining immigrants inside Social Circle warehouse in April. Again, Atlanta Journal-Constitution, February 9th article by Lautaro Greenspan. The city of Social Circle officials say Immigration and Customs Enforcement has finalized the purchase of an industrial warehouse with plans of turning it into a sprawling detention facility where as many as 10,000 immigrants could be held. The city reported on its Facebook feed Sunday the pending purchase has gone through. City officials have been informed by multiple sources that the sale has been completed. ICE is now the owner. Detainees are expected to begin arriving at the new facility as early as April. Social Circle is located primarily in Walton County, about 50 miles east of Atlanta. There's your answer about the distance. The update from Social Circle came from as municipalities elsewhere attempt to complicate ICE's plans to expand its detention infrastructure in their communities, and as private companies who own the facilities that federal authorities want to purchase pull out of the deals following intense public pressure. Despite concerns over the toll a large detention center would take on the city's water and sewer infrastructure, Social Circle City Manager Eric Taylor told the AJC there is nothing the city can do to block ICE's plans. The U.S. Constitution has a supremacy clause that says the federal government is not subject to state and local regulations, Taylor said. So that would be a claim that this is something that zoning is something they can ignore nationwide. I'm not certain that's, I don't know. I'm not certain, though. That doesn't sound like the last and final word in the question of whether the interpretation of the supremacy clause being presented here is correct. But It does sound like the sort of thing that somebody who might not know the jurisprudence around it might think is the answer by looking at it and seeing that it's called the Supremacy Clause. But I don't know. Federal law is supreme, so they don't have to apply for zoning. They're not subject to any kind of regulation from the city of Social Circle. Last month, U.S. Senator John Ossoff urged leaders in the Trump administration's immigration enforcement apparatus to answer the city's questions about the project. On Friday, Ossoff asked for the plan to be scrapped. Again, urged the department to heed the significant concerns raised by Social Circle's leaders and citizens and abandon this plan. In their Thursday update, city officials said the warehouse being considered by ICE was in escrow and moving toward final purchase by the Department of Homeland Security. They received that news from U.S. Representative Mike Collins, who represents the area. Yes, he's a Republican, in case you were wondering. The sale now appears to have been consummated. There's not the only thing being consummated there at the highest levels of DHS, as you know. Collins also informed the local authorities that DHS had conducted an engineering evaluation of city utilities and that economic impact reports are being prepared, though not finalized. The property in question is currently an unused warehouse, as you know, at 1365 East Hightower Trail, if you need a place to go protest or you want an address. County tax records show that the facility, valued at nearly $26.5 million, spans more than 183 acres. That's less than I thought. It was built in 2024 and is described as a mega distribution plant. But that's not the same thing as a place for 10,000 people to live for an undetermined amount of time. Here, by the way, the piece is illustrated by a photo of attendees listening to plans to oppose a potential ICE detention facility that could be built in Social Circle. On a Tuesday, January 6th, 2026 meeting, about 75 people attended the event organized by One Circle Community Coalition at a community hall in the city. And I can tell you that the crowd sitting in, relatively rapt attention in folding chairs around circular folding tables here is, in the photo, 100% white. And I would guess perhaps that the youngest person in this picture, I would guess, is in their mid-40s. Possibly, if they're lucky. Okay, so just letting you know who was there at the organizing, organization of opposition here. And I guess that does tell us something about the demographics of Social Circle after all. So records identify the current owner as PNK S1 LLC. A Georgia Corporations Division entry for the business lists a New York principal address, which matches that of PNK Group, a developer and general contractor that builds and leases industrial facilities. In a statement shared last month with AJC, the PNK Group spokesperson said several potential buyers had expressed interest in the warehouse. Because this is a sales transaction, any future use of the property will be determined solely by the eventual purchaser and will be subject to the required local review and approval process. PNK will not have any role in operational decisions once the property is sold, that statement said. The prospect of an ICE facility within Social Circle city limits has rankled residents who voiced opposition to the project during a January 6th community meeting and a January 14th protest, linked herein. Most of the city of Social Circle sits within Walton County. In 2024, 73% of the voters there backed Trump, while 27% cast ballots for his Democratic opponent. You know who that was, former Vice President Kamala Harris. A pledge to create a mass deportation program, of course, was a signature component of Trump's campaign platform. They do helpfully announce there. There's been pushback elsewhere. That's noted in this story. Plans to convert warehouses into mass detention facilities are underway in 6 other cities across Missouri, Arizona, Louisiana, Texas, and Virginia, each to hold 5,000 to 10,000 people. 16 smaller warehouses, including one in Jefferson, Georgia, would hold up to 1,500 people each. Other states selected to host the smaller warehouses include Texas, Maryland, Michigan, Florida, Texas again. They got twice. Indiana, New Hampshire, Oklahoma, Louisiana, New Jersey, Utah, Pennsylvania, and Minnesota. Across many of these communities, the proposed facilities have sparked backlash and protests, as you might have expected. In El Paso, Texas,
The nonpartisan city council unanimously passed a plan of action last week to explore ways to prevent the opening of a new ICE detention center within city limits. Last month, Kansas City, Missouri Council passed a resolution placing a 5-year ban on non-municipal detention facilities. Local leaders in Maryland also signed bills banning private detention centers. Elsewhere, private ones, so that's of importance. Elsewhere, local officials say they're powerless to resist. It's looking like it's out of our hands, a surprise Arizona council member told reporters, according to USA Today. ICE bought a warehouse there for $70 million in cash, spurring a protest of roughly 1,000 residents. Orlando's Democratic mayor similarly told USA Today that the city is unable to take action to limit or regulate any activity by the federal government following reports of ICE officials visiting a warehouse there. At the state level, the New Mexico legislature passed a bill banning ICE detention centers earlier this month. Similar bills introduced in Massachusetts, New York, and Delaware. More immediate road bumps could come from private landowners backing out of deals to sell their properties to the federal government. On January 30th, the owner of a Virginia warehouse said it would not move forward with a deal to sell 550,000 square foot warehouses one warehouse to federal authorities. In Oklahoma City, criticism at city council meetings and downtown protests led the private owners of a warehouse there to pull out of its deal with ICE. And in Salt Lake City, a local family business that owns the warehouse ICE identified as a future jail said it has no plans to sell or lease the properties in question to the federal government after protesters gathered outside of their offices. So I think you're about 5 seconds away from Trump saying, we're going to do eminent domain and seize these properties. We offered you a chance to take fair market value. In fact, we offered you a chance to take far more than fair market value. And now we're going to screw you over and just seize the thing. So I'm just wondering if I can find, what was it, PLK S1? I got to look that up again. And see about the ownership of the PNK. That was it. I'll tell you what else came up. PNK S1 LLC ownership. S1. There's the Google search that came up. And I'll tell you that I didn't click through to read all these things because perhaps, I don't know whether they were getting the story right or not, but something on Threads from the Senate Dems on Threads, and I don't know whether that's actually the Senate Democrats or not, but that's the name of it, or maybe they're addressing it to the Senate Dems on Threads. Anyway, it doesn't matter because it's not rendering correctly and I'm not able to open it. But the search engine summary claims here the seller PNK S1 LLC is linked to PNK Group, a logistics company we saw with offices in New York, right? But this is claiming that this logistics company is founded in, where would you think? You know, that you would be taking this deal, getting $128 million for a maybe $25 million property, founded in Russia in 2004 and headquartered in Moscow. Is it? Is that right? No idea so far, but something that I think researchers would probably want to take a look at, let's say, and see if they could establish as being true. Here, Annie Lee over at Daily Kos has got something on the subject just yesterday. ICE paying $128 million for a warehouse that sold less than 2 years ago for $29 million. Has a lead on that rumor. Anyway, we'll see whether it plays out as actually being true. We can't really be sure at this point, but rest assured that there are people who are looking to make that connection. PNK S1 LLC being apparently a subsidiary of a Russia-based PNK group. What's the source of this? I think at this point, all I can say is online speculation, but I direct your attention to it because I wouldn't be surprised to see something about it playing out over the next couple of days, and you will be able to say, I heard this irresponsible speculation first at Kagro in the morning. It seems to be happening. All right, let's see. Other things that I should bring to your attention in the closing minutes of today's show. This I do want to read to you from Daily Kos. It actually is a ProPublica publication, but running at Daily Kos and bylined to ProPublica here, which I think we ought to catch up on. What meetings among Trump lawyers reveal about the FBI's seizure of election records in Georgia. And this here, now we get the byline finally, the ProPublica byline a little further down here. Doug Bach-Clark and Jeremy Kohler for ProPublica putting this piece together, but it's a lengthy piece. But I want to read it also, or I want to note it side by side, at least, with another piece here brought to my attention via Blue Sky post from Phil Williams, whose name we've called before and who I think even Greg has pointed out, just doing a fantastic job in local Nashville area reporting. I think these two things ought to be viewed hand in hand. The people meeting and consulting with various shady figures in and outside and just around the Trump administration with respect to Trump's vindictive crusade to try to put someone somewhere in jail for stealing the election from me in 2020, and the most unsavory characters coming to light here. So let me begin, though, because everybody knows what amazing work ProPublica is doing, although I do want to highlight this work and highlight these reporters as well. Don't mean to shortchange them. I'm sure we'll get back to that this week. Phil Williams has had his moment here and again, but deserves another one. Local reporter for News Channel 8 in Nashville, and deserves the accolades that come his way. Here's his story. Conspiracy theorist claims he's working with Trump administration given access to planned indictments. There's another weirdo afoot, this time in Nashville, and we should find out about him. Former Millersville Assistant Police Chief is who this guy is. Shawn Taylor, S-H-A-W-N, Taylor, has made claims about inside knowledge of Trump DOJ investigations during recent podcast interviews. Recent podcast interviews seem to be where a lot of the most unsavory stuff is surfacing. Phil Williams has an eye for it, reporting for WTVF. I guess that's News Channel 8. A controversial former assistant police chief, known for his sometimes far-fetched conspiracy theories, now claims to be working with the Trump administration and to have been given access to still secret grand jury indictments. And hey, anything's possible. Apparently the president is taking advice from people who claim to have seen secret undiscovered text in the Constitution, ignored for 250 years. Well, 240. Shawn Taylor, 51, resigned in December of 2024, resigned now, from his position as assistant police chief for tiny Millersville, Tennessee. Of course, he says it's a retirement. He had been working there, of course, for less than a year. So retiring from the job he took less than a year ago, under a cloud, let's say, assistant police chief for Millersville, Tennessee. At the time, Taylor faced a criminal probe led by the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. Might have had something to do with his choice of retirement. Like he has done in the past, Taylor claims to be providing the Department of Justice with evidence of trillions of dollars in campaign finance and mortgage fraud, evidence that he claims everyone else has missed, but that he has personally uncovered, not unlike the person who uncovered the secret language of the Constitution in microfilm in Fort Lauderdale. We are talking to members of the DOJ and members of the Trump cabinet. So that's the reason I'm driving today through numerous states to get up there, Taylor said in an early January podcast interview. By the way, if he wants to minimize the number of states he passes through, he can go Tennessee straight into Virginia, straight into D.C. That's still multiple states, Tennessee being the first of them, Virginia the second, D.C. not a state, of course. But that's not necessarily the preferred route. I'm just pointing that out. 2 days later, he posted a video on his personal X account. You can see I'm sitting in front of the White House. Been here since Monday. I've had over a dozen in-person meetings, he said. Now, normally that's not the thing, not the kind of thing that you'd necessarily believe. You took a picture in front of the White House? Yes. So as you can see, I've had many personal meetings inside this building. No, not from the photo. But Ed Martin is around, so maybe it's true. Anyway, here's an embedded video from his X post. It is there. At the end of January, he posted another video saying he was back in the nation's capital. Had some meetings with people from Justice yesterday, walking to another meeting now, Taylor said. But it appears to be more than just talk, as Taylor has sometimes documented his travels with photos. Last October, he posted a selfie on his X account showing him outside, again, the Justice Department with Joe Flynn. Joe Flynn! Yes! Now, you may be saying, wait a minute, Joe Flynn? Well, he's a brother, of course, of former Army General, as they call him here, Mike Flynn. Of course, also former disgraced National Security Advisor, fired in about as much time as it took to fire, what's his name here, Sean Taylor, from his job. But he's not even the most famous Flynn brother. Not that I can remember the name of the second most famous Flynn brother, who it does still, I think, has an Army career right now, active duty. But this is Joe Flynn, the even less famous brother of Mike Flynn, who isn't actually maybe an influential figure because he holds no position. But anyway, that's the point. And by the way, there's some sort of, I guess, obscuring of one of the faces in this photo as well. There are 4 people in there. One I can see is Sean Taylor. I guess the other one maybe is Mike Flynn. I don't know who this third person is, and this woman, unidentified. Anyway, there they are outside the Department of Justice. In May of 2025, Taylor posed for a photo that he said was inside the offices of the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia. With him were Joe Flynn, as well as Arizona election denier and state Senator Mark Fincham. That's definitely a name I've heard before. There's the embedded post. Recently, in a podcast interview with QAnon conspiracy theorist Nino Rodriguez, Taylor dropped another name. So the people that you're talking with in Washington, D.C., they're very prominent people, right? Rodriguez asked. You're talking to some very powerful officials about this? You're getting your work in front of the right people? Yeah, Taylor replied. Had a nice meeting with Ed Martin. That is entirely possible. The other day, and discussed a lot of this stuff. Except Ed Martin is one of those DNIs, do not invite people, that they keep marginalizing and pushing out of his DOJ offices. At the end of January, Taylor had posted a photo of himself with Martin at what he said was a meeting in D.C. Okay, maybe. Martin was Donald Trump's so-called weaponization czar, charged with investigating primarily Democrats. According to a report by CNN, Martin was recently demoted after a Justice Department review found that he had, quote, improperly leaked grand jury material. And then, of course, the accusation here is that Sean Taylor had some weird insider information about investigations. Maybe he was the guy to whom this was leaked. That review of Martin's activities focused on whether grand jury material gathered in the department's mortgage fraud inquiries into Democratic Senator Adam Schiff and New York Attorney General Letitia James had been illegally shared with people not authorized to possess that information, CNN said. News Channel 5 investigates cannot say for sure what, if anything, that controversy has to do with Sean Taylor. But in a December podcast with a QAnon conspiracy theorist, another one, Alfredo Luna, there's an awful lot of Hispanic QAnon conspiracy theorist podcasters out there, Taylor said he was carrying his information to the top to people like Ed Martin, not from people like Ed Martin. Ed Martin's busting his ass, Taylor told Luma, claiming to have inside knowledge about grand jury investigations. You have that knowledge, of course, as well. It's no longer inside information. The grand juries aren't indicting anybody. They know
what Greg knows.
That's bullshit.
Exactly. We're ready for some of these asshats to go to prison. It's coming. I've literally held some of the indictments in my hand when I was in D.C., except none of those indictments have made it to, courtrooms anywhere or into the hands of any police or other federal authorities who might actually effect an arrest. But remember, he's also claiming, I know about trillions of dollars in mortgage fraud, except there's apparently no dollars in mortgage fraud being charged anywhere because it's just not working out for Ed Martin or anyone else in DOJ or nearby. But Taylor made similar claims in yet another QAnon podcast with MAGA candidate for Congress, Christine Bish. What a bish she is, who has accused Democrat Adam Schiff, not Bish, of mortgage fraud, but yet no one else has been able to do it. I can't comment a lot on that, he insisted. That's being worked on. I know that for a fact, and that's all I can say about that. Nino Rodriguez also wanted to know about the impact of fraud investigations being pursued by the Trump administration. You can say with all confidence that a storm is coming. They love to say that on QAnon. And my audience better be ready, Rodriguez asked. Oh, it's coming, Taylor insisted. The former Millersville assistant police chief recently went viral with another video in which he addressed his remarks to President Trump. We don't know whether he watched it or not. We've already identified trillions of dollars in cash that's being moved through the mortgages, Taylor claimed. We've identified billions that's going through healthcare illegally. We've identified human trafficking rings. They're still hung up on that, even though they got one right in front of them that they now deny. Anyway, he continued, we're ready, President Trump. We're asking you to help us.
From networksradio.com.
Make us your presidential point team to go after these bastards.
In the morning with David Waldman.
You get the idea. The story goes on for some time. I'll thumb through it for you. We can give you more details about it. In other news, as I mentioned, ProPublica actually has some more reliable information about people who are equally unsavory and equally untrustworthy still circulating within Trump circles. We'll see you tomorrow.